well and were significantly impacted by Hurricane Helene. So I've been in conversation, they're okay, sorry I should say that, they're okay. Some flooding and some roof damage. But I've been in conversations with them a lot over the last week and a half, and it makes you think a lot more about the quality and safety and just the built environment that surrounds you when you're dealing with a disaster like that. So it also makes me really grateful to be here with folks like you that put such thought and care into that work, so much so that you would come to a good wood celebration. After being in North Carolina for most of my upbringing, I spent about a decade in the Gulf, Habitat for Humanity, in Louisiana, Mississippi, and then Texas. I led their restores there, and there's so many stories of recovery, so many stories of really interesting building projects. Ask me later about 200,000 board feet from NASA if you'd like to hear that story. But the thing that I took from my time with Habitat for Humanity most of all was this through line of fulfillment, of being able to take a company that did one good thing. They kind of put one toe over the line. Maybe they emptied out a warehouse with old stock and donated it. Maybe they made a big purchase and donated it to people in need. Sometimes they just think of it as this one-off thing, but it gave me the opportunity to introduce them to the impact that they made, to expand on that impact, and ultimately to kind of like adopt the identity of what we were about at Habitat for Humanity. That type of work really served me well and made it an organic transition to the B Corp world. So you may have heard of B Corps. Somebody raise your hand if you have. Yeah, that was easy. Set that one up for myself. The shortest way to talk about B Corps is that they use business as a force for good. We just mentioned the storms and climate change. I don't have to tell you about the crises that we face. But people know the importance of sustainable business, sustainable construction, and I think that's why the demand is increasing. But where there is greater demand, there's always going to be more people claiming that they are fulfilling it in the way that you want than there are people actually doing it. We call that washing, greenwashing, which I know you're all familiar with, but there are so many types. And our marketing sophistication, unfortunately, has gone faster than our operational sophistication to meet the ways we want to do things. So I won't talk about third-party certifications to folks who throw around FSC, Just, LEED, Passive House, Living Building, and many other things that I can't talk that much about. But I'm thrilled. I moved here on purpose to be in a place not only where we care a lot about our trees, air, and water, but specifically to be around folks that want to do the work and learn about the companies that they support. So there's a lot of companies that have decided to prove it through the B Corp certification to demonstrate their high social and environmental impact. You can see here 9,200 certified B Corps in the world, 2,500 in the US and Canada. We have about 160, maybe a little bit more now, in our region, which is Oregon and Southwest Washington. And wonderfully, this thing is continuing to grow and it's taken off. A lot of people expected when COVID hit, applications to become a B Corp would go down. The exact opposite happened. And in fact, since, here's an interesting statistic. Compared to 2019, there was a 488% increase in news attention to B Corp related projects or to B Corps in 2020. So why would that be? We were facing a health crisis. We were facing a racial reckoning. We had all these wildfires and other natural catastrophes. It brought people back to values. So that growth, there we go, has resulted in an awesome growth of this movement, both locally and globally. You might recognize some of these American B Corps. Anybody have a favorite local B Corp you want to shout out? Suckers, yeah. Love them. Anybody else?
New Seasons.
New Seasons, yeah. What? Green Hammer. Yeah. Birdsmouth, yeah. Newest certified B Corp. Awesome. It's this list is always growing, and the absolute best part of my job is talking to companies right after they get certified to find out what now. you took this assessment. We're going to talk about that. What now? How do you grow that impact and become a part of a larger movement, be something larger than yourself, and jump into collective action? But why did they do it? This process, in many cases, is between 6 and 18 months long. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. There's a lot of answering questions. I heard for the first time in a long time today that somebody had a not difficult time with it. Congratulations. Golf clap. Why do they do it? There's so many reasons. Some of them are right up here, but the one that resonates to me the most is, and that I hear the most, is when people say, well, I noticed so-and-so brand. I love Green Hammer. I just love what they do. I kind of wanted to see how I stack up, like how our operations compare. And then it starts from there, right? Comparison may be the thief of joy, but it is also a great motivator, and I think sometimes that's a part of it. We want companies to both have that intrinsic motivation, right? Like, I think it feels like the right thing to do for most companies that have gone through this challenging process. But we also want to pay attention to the value proposition, right? So I'll read these really quickly. These are some ways that B Corp certification is increasingly recognized, trusted, and used to differentiate. 81% of adults under 30 who recognize B Corp have some to very high trust in certification. Awareness of the B Corp logo among all US adults is at 36%. Among adults 18 to 29 is at 51%. That's way up just from 2.5 years ago, which is super exciting. Values most associated with certified B Corps: fair business practices, sustainability and climate change, access to healthcare, and racial equity. My favorite one here is like, well, what is fair business? What's that? We could argue semantics. This is my favorite. Okay, so the average ratio of highest paid employee to lowest paid employee globally, what would you think? 10 to 1? 5,000 to 1? Okay, it's 144 to 1. That's average in the world. That's a Harvard study. I don't do global studies personally. B Corps, the average is 6 to 1, right? So it gives you a sense, right? That's just one metric, but gives you a sense of what we're about. And also B Corps, this is as of, I think, the beginning of last year, raised more than $2 billion in capital. That's just one way of showing the investment that people want to make in companies. Okay, so let's talk quick and dirty of the how. You take the B impact assessment, receive 80 points out of a possible 200. The average score of a certified B Corp is in the low to mid 90s. The average score of just a company that doesn't get certified, thank you, is in the mid 50s. You have to adopt a legal framework that accounts for all stakeholders. So literally that means changing from being an LLC, an S Corp, et cetera, to a benefit corporation that states that you are about more than profit. And you have to make your score transparent on your company profile on the B Lab Global website. The score that you make transparent is going to be across these 5 impact areas. So governance, workers, environment, which is only one, but I think it's the one that people come most often to the B Corp movement enthused about, and then they have a chance to open up and explore the framework and grow their impact. I wanted to give you a snapshot of a score. This is a local B Corp, really high score in environment, really high score in workers and community, less so in customers. That means maybe they're not doing customer education, right? Like the way the scoring is now, it's any path to 80. This is actually A to Z Wine Works, which is most of the wine that you're drinking tonight. So you can see they've treated their environment really well in that. All right, my time is short and I'm just now getting to local. So Local PDX exists to create boundless opportunities for B Corps in our region. We want to create an ecosystem that supports companies that are going through this certification process. And we do so through certification, support, community, collaboration, and celebration. The image you see is the first, as far as I know, the first branded piece of asset, I guess, for Local PDX before my time. I think it's really telling that the timber is front and center, right? Like this is a part of an essential part of our business ecosystem. And at the bottom there, you can't really read it probably, but we have a directory on our website that'll show you all B Corps. You can go and, whether as a customer, as a business leader that's looking for a partner, etc., go and check them out. This is a snapshot of what is the fastest growing sector among B Corps in Oregon and Southwest Washington, which is the built environment, our real estate and development, design, build, materials, and architecture and engineering. Given my background, I'm so excited about that. What that allows is, unlike some places where there are far fewer companies that share this, when you have an ecosystem this robust and healthy, you can take collective action that makes a huge impact. So we know that if the outcomes that we're looking for are climate justice and racial equity, I say we know that, we believe that that has to come from a root system of the stakeholder economy where you're taking into account all your stakeholders, which are the things that you get assessed on, right? Your workers, your customers, the environment, etc. So I would invite you to come be a part of the community. Of course, if you end up in front of me, I might pitch you to consider becoming a B Corp, but it's not all about that. Certification is not going to be for every company at every time, and more than 90% of our programming and resources are for everybody. You can see that our upcoming events are kind of across the board, right? So we've got inclusivity, we've got actual DEI trainings, climate policy advocacy, we've got some just parties. We love parties. Community is really important. And we have some signature events that to my mind, stand up against any of the other sort of business networking events that you could find in town that we would love to invite you to. I bet I'm over my time. Thank y'all. I really would love to chat with anybody after our presentations are done.
With that, just a little bit about myself. My company is Birdsmouth Design Build. My name is Josh Salinger. I'm the owner and founder of the company. We build residential, passive house and zero energy buildings. We have architects and builders on staff, and we also do decarbonization of existing buildings. So if you have a house that has a gas furnace or a gas fireplace, gas water heater, we look into conservation measures for the existing house and how we can get you off of gas and decarbonize those buildings. So those are kind of things that we do. Other work that I do, I'm also vice president of Passive House Northwest. So I do a lot of work in the passive house community too. I teach the FIAS Passive House Builders Training course. That's like a 300 level course for architects and builders about sustainable building. So I spend a lot of time doing that. Additionally, I'm an expert member on Green Building Advisor. If you guys are ever curious about, you have a problem with a building or an architecture and you're trying to figure out what is the solution, Green Building Advisor is an online website that just has all of the solutions in the community of the people that really understand that stuff. So I answer a lot of questions there, write articles for them. And on top of that, I also contribute to Fine Home Building Magazine. I write articles there and do a bunch of video work and talking and teaching around the country for Fine Home Building. So a bunch of work in the built environment. So we do a lot of work with wood, believe it or not. So I thought, to kind of demonstrate some of the benefits of FSC woods and good wood, I would just talk about just one project that we built. This was a home that we built in Damascus, Oregon. The clients moved in about a year ago. And this particular project is a single-story home, 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath, about 2,400 square feet, and it is passive house certified through FIAS and zero energy certified through Earth Advantage. And so this particular home, the clients came to us because they wanted to have something that was highly resilient, something that they could pass on to their grandchildren and even beyond that, so something that would last a really long time. And importantly, they wanted something that just was really a light impact on the environment. So as we got into the challenge of this house, designing it and building it, we were really thinking about how can we reduce not just the operational energy of this building, but also the energy, the upfront carbon that is in the embodied carbon within the materials in this building. And so that's where the story of the FSC comes in with this particular building here. So a couple things about it, mentioned the Earth Advantage and Passive House certified, but the wood we used in this entire building, there's no plastic foams or anything above grade, it's all wood. And all that wood is FSC certified from Sustainable Northwest here, including Sankofa lumber. I haven't seen Valerie yet, but I bet she's here. Where's Valerie? Is she around?
She's here somewhere.
She's around. There she is. She's flying. Okay. Yeah, okay. It happens to the best of us. So yeah, we used all of her wood for headers and cripple studs and blocking and all that kind of stuff in this project too. So not only was all the framing lumber and plywood and all that stuff FSC certified, but we were able to use some of Valerie's wood for this project too. The other thing about this too is like they just wanted to have, because of the wildfire events, it's got really high indoor air quality with lots of filtration, carbon filtration and MERV filtration within the house too. So. Anyways, it dawned on me as I was asked to speak here, think of a project that I wanted to showcase about sustainable wood, and it made me just think about our values and the values of B Corp that Wes just so elegantly just kind of laid out, and the values of our company, which is our mission of our company is to address climate change through the built environment, and those of the Forest Stewardship Council. And so, I cruised over to the website and I just jotted down a couple of, bullet points here about things of values that we all shared in common. And the alignment here was really, really great. And so I'm not going to read all these things, but, we're all for protecting wildlife habitat, limiting the use of hazardous chemicals, all these things, managed forests, protecting the rights of indigenous peoples, shopping locally, climate justice is social justice, right? So the alignment here was, we knew it was aligned, but as I started looking into it, I just realized like these are our people. So with this building, we wanted to focus on the embodied carbon of it because we've kind of got the operational carbon, the zero energy thing down. And so we're really focusing on the embodied carbon. And so the FSC scenarios always store more carbon than business as usual approaches. So among 64 properties we evaluated, FSC management produced carbon storage ranging from a minimum of 13% more carbon to as much as 69% more carbon than business as usual, averaging 29% more carbon than business as usual. This includes carbon that's stored in the forest and wood products. So all this wood that you can see here, everything in the walls of this whole building is all extremely low carbon. And how do we know that? Well, we did the math, right? So there's this great tool through Builders for Climate Action and through RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute. And this is essentially a calculator that you can plug in various different materials and it'll spit out the embodied carbon equivalent of those materials. So you could say, well, okay, what's the embodied carbon of something like an XPS foam versus using something like a wood fiber board? And they have all these EPDs, so environmental product declarations, that they've researched and put into this tool. And so you can actually do takeoffs of the exact amount of square footage in your building, enter in all of those materials and compare it to other materials. So it allows you to really, choose the materials wisely so that you have some empirical evidence as to like, are we really impacting climate through using, low carbon or often carbon sequestering materials like a lot of these wood products are. And so anyways, as we did this, one of the things we did with this building is we did a concrete-free slab on grade. So there's a concrete foundation around the perimeter that holds up the walls, but the slab itself is simply just a layer of insulation, a vapor barrier, and then 2 layers of plywood over the top. And we were able to drive down the carbon usage of this building significantly, quite a bit, by using an actual carbon sequestering product instead of one of the most carbon intensive products on planet Earth. If concrete was a country, it would go US, China, concrete, and then India. So concrete is huge, and we were able to not only remove the concrete from the slab of this building, but then use FSC woods instead of just regular plywood. And just the switch from the regular plywood to the FSC plywood saved us, 5,760 kilograms of carbon equivalent just by making that one little change. And that change meant calling up Sustainable Northwest Wood instead of calling up Par Lumber. And the prices really were not that impactful. So, these things are not that difficult, and they can be empirically, measured, and you can really make a big difference with these things. So, briefly with this, we just kind of wanted to show a graph here of different scenarios. Let's see if I can take this off here. Maybe.
Oh, sorry.
So over here, you can see that this is the embodied carbon, this black line. So wherever you build a building, that's going to stay the same throughout the life of that building. And this is operational energy usage over time. And a typical building, you can see, just spikes right up because it's using a lot of energy over time. Well, through the zero energy and passive house methodologies that we're using, we're reducing that the operational energy, but we're actually starting our building at a lower spot because of the lower embodied carbon materials we're using. So over time, our building, this Damascus passive house here, with the FSC wood, doesn't even reach the embodied carbon targets, much less what a typical building will do that uses that operational energy over time. So it really makes a huge impact. There we go. Oops. I got two more slides quickly. So with the point of this slide here was I took some pictures of some of the studs and some of the projects that we're building. Nowadays, almost all of our work is being used with FSC wood. And I just Googled where these lumber, I took a picture of Frank Lumber, Googled it. Oh, look at this. It's just south of Portland, right? The point is a lot of this wood and these companies are local. And we're supporting these local economies while doing this good for the environment too. So, we're doing it. You can do it too. It's not that hard. These are just some of our current and upcoming projects where we're using FSC woods and reducing the amount of carbon and just trying to do generally good work by the environment. So with that, thank you very much.
All right, my name is Laura Squillace, and I am an architect and director of design at Greenhammer Design Build. And this is the beautiful Wallowa mountain range that the project that I'm going to be speaking and sharing with you tonight is located at. And so, in case you guys aren't familiar with Greenhammer, we are a full-service architecture and construction company here in Portland, Oregon, and we specialize in high-performance buildings that are certified to the most stringent green building standards in the world right now. So that includes Passive House and LEED Platinum, Zero Energy and Zero Water, as well as Living Building Challenge certified buildings, which are really hard. Greenhammer has always been into using good wood. It just has happened over the decades in different ways and through different means. So before there was a Build Local Alliance to help us connect with good wood sources, and before there was a Sustainable Northwest Wood to help us connect with good wood sources, Greenhammer's founder, Stephanie Guillet, who's here tonight, had to create a sister company named Urban Timberworks so that he could fell and mill his own locally harvested urban timber salvage that he was framing full homes with. But then, fortunately, in 2005, he helped co-found the Build Local Alliance with Peter Hayes, who also might be here tonight. And then a couple years later, Sustainable Northwest Wood opened and has vastly increased our capacity to source and connect with good wood sources from beyond our backyard into the whole region and really understand the stories behind those woods and connect with the people. So the stories I'm going to share tonight are all through the lens of this project that we designed last year and are building this year out in the Wallowas, so about 5 hours east of here. And we call it the Little Wing Residence because it has a little wing. It's got an ADU unit that's about 500 square feet that is adjacent to its 1,500 square foot main house. And it's divided by a beautiful exterior breezeway that frames views of this stunning wild and scenic river. So the river bends south, and this is the view that we'll capture with the home. And this is the elevation that kind of captures that view, and the breezeway that's kind of hidden beyond the gable beyond looks out on that river valley. So when we met with the owner, they were clear that they wanted to do this project as consciously and as responsibly as possible. And for them, that really meant minimizing their ecological footprint, specifically their carbon footprint. That was the lens in which we were really gauging things, was carbon, climate responsive design. and while also maximizing our support of local businesses. So this is in a region that has a small economy. You know, there's a lot of loggers there that, you know, it's a depressed economy in some ways, and so they really wanted to support the local economy. So one of the first decisions that we made that really excited me was we said, let's not use any drywall at all. Drywall has a dirty story behind it. It's highly carbon intensive. It uses a lot of heat to produce. And so what are we going to use instead of wallboard drywall? Let's use white fir. Let's use TNG vertical siding on the interior walls as well as the ceiling. And it's drastically lower in carbon. And we were using the beam analysis tool that Josh Kissinger referenced as well, which is highly intuitive and fun, and it just gives you really quick feedback on what if this material versus that material. And so in addition to just being beautiful and biophilic by nature, we're really proud of where this white fir is coming from. This is coming from 20 miles down the road. This is locally harvested on this beautiful land of 4,000 acres. And then it was milled, you know, some 10 miles beyond that. And it was coming from either dead or dying trees, white fir, or white fir trees that were simply too large for most other mills to be interested in taking. This is the guy behind that logging industry, logging business. His name is Jim Zacharias. He runs JZ Lumber. He's a third-generation logger and miller. He wanted to be a wildlife biologist, apparently, but he really wanted to stay in his hometown, and that meant keeping on with a business that he could sustain his family with. And so he applies that ethos to the way he manages his forest. He's also part of the Wallowa Resources Board, which means that he's highly engaged in educating his community on how to steward the land while also supporting their local economy in perpetuity. So these are the kinds of people that we're able to meet and really know and understand where we're getting our material from Sustainable Northwest Wood, right? They're not just brokering the business deal, they're helping us connect and form relationships with the people. On the outside of the building, we clad it in incense cedar in a shiplap profile. And we did this for some obvious reasons and maybe some not so obvious reasons. Incense cedar is naturally durable and rot resistant. There's a ton of snow that sits up against this home. Once it's built, it's in construction, by the way. These are all renderings. But it's also ultra low in its carbon footprint. We did, again, the beam analysis. So maybe what would be more intuitive in a fire-prone region would be using fiber cement or concrete or metal or stucco. But we really were focused on lowering the carbon footprint. So we have treated this wood with a non-toxic borate fire retardant, one-time treatment, and then stained over it. We also made sure that we were specifying a character grade instead of a clear grade for this, because that uses the wood more efficiently, right? We're not discarding the waste of a product that doesn't have knots. We also love the look of it. This is where that incense cedar is coming from. Through Sustainable Northwest Wood again, we're procuring it from the Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua tribe, specifically from wood that was salvaged from a fire that happened just in 2019 with the Milepost 97 fire. A year prior to that, they had reclaimed 17,000 acres of land from the US federal government that were their ancestral lands. And so by supporting the purchase of wood from them, we are directly supporting their ecological and cultural restoration projects. So specifically, they are restoring native oak savanna land. So this land that looks like forest, because BLM had been logging it for decades, part of it actually was oak savanna land, so they're removing conifers and planting oaks and native grassland species. And they're also restoring their indigenous fire management practices like prescribed burns and thinning, so that hopefully those big fires don't sweep through again. Below the incense cedar, we used some juniper wood. You can see that we used it on the landscape stairs and the breezeway as well. It's extremely rot resistant, even more so than the cedar, and it helps us kind of integrate the building materiality into the landscape. But in addition to it being beautiful and durable, it has an amazing story of being part of restoration projects. So out in eastern Oregon, juniper is taking over grassland habitats. Not only is it invasive, but it's a huge water hog. It sucks the landscape dry. It leaves the native flora and fauna without water, which then causes erosion. And so by procuring this juniper, we're actually restoring those grassland and watershed ecosystems through these programs, which feels really good. All of the framing lumber in the walls and the roofs was FSC certified, similar to Josh's project, but many of our walls and our roofing panels were actually panelized in a prefabricated way up in British Columbia by an amazing company called Collective Carpentry. And by doing so in a factory, in a facility, we're able to drastically reduce the amount of wood waste because everything is calculated down to the 16th of an inch. So wood waste is drastically reduced, and any wood waste that is produced is then burned by their fire burning furnace. So you could essentially say that the facility is a zero wood waste facility. More framing lumber on site for the walls and floor that weren't prefabricated. Again, all of it was FSC certified. And I'll wrap it up by just saying some of the interior finishes also were FSC certified. So we love to work with Xena Forestry. It's an hour south of here. And it's an amazing third generation family business. They really employ regenerative and restorative practices to the way they manage their forest. It is very fun to get a tour if you get on down there. They're happy to show you what they're doing down there. And one of their products is a maple floor, so it's an engineered floor, so it uses the wood really efficiently and it's highly durable. And we're also using in the little wing, the retreat end, the edge grain flooring. So you'll see that when you go to the PDX airport next time. It's much smaller pieces of wood, so you can really utilize all pieces of the wood and not large diameter trees, but smaller, which makes it really good and beautiful. It's beautiful parquet design. And then all of the casework and interior cabinetry and accent walls were Columbia Forest Products FSC certified maple pine. So this is all to say that good wood can come from a variety of places. This is all wood from Oregon, from a variety of different purveyors and people taking care of the land in different ways. So you can get it FSC certified, but also there's these far more interesting stories sometimes where it's coming from fire salvage, invasive species removal, tribal land restoration projects, and maybe perhaps our client and my favorite source, these really local purveyors that are stewards of the land that really are part and parcel of the place that we're building in.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Schmidt.
Cuevas.
And we're going to be doing a dual presentation today. We've got about 8 minutes, so we're going to cover some pretty high-level content in a relatively short amount of time. I guess we can briefly introduce ourselves. We're both new to the Sustainable Northwest team. For those of you who aren't familiar, Sustainable Northwest is the nonprofit side of Sustainable Northwest Wood. We're engaged in a lot of work that matches the sort of ethos of the group here. I think a lot of shared values. And what we're going to be talking about today is, at a very high level, what does scaling and normalizing intentionality and transparency within the wood product supply chain look like?
So Bryan, I appreciate you mentioning how complicated it is to source, figure out where your wood is coming from. My name is Ace again. I have an architecture background, so this is very familiar space for me. I appreciate all the designers and architects here tonight. And we're gonna try at, again, a high level explain how we approach an architecture building project and what that would look like, and then how we implement and integrate into design teams.
Okay, so there's this kind of fundamental question. What does scaling and normalizing what we're talking about today look like, right? I think all of us in the room share similar values and understand the social, economic, ecological values that come along with intentional sourcing. But there's this question of how do we make this something that becomes part of a normalized market process? And so the kinds of clients that we work with on a regular basis are coming to us with this sort of fundamental question of how do they even begin to engage with the supply chain in the wood products realm. And so there's a kind of a hyper-simplistic model that might say, well, you've got forests, and then you've got primary manufacturers, secondary manufacturers like laminators, and then finally you have a project. But the reality is that you have a pretty diverse tree of sources, manufacturers, secondary manufacturers, fabricators, etc., that end up providing to your final product. We're talking a little bit through the lens of mass timber today, just as a heads up, but this applies any way you want to think about it. And so here's this sort of still somewhat basic supply chain model that shows, hey, you've got a couple different forest sources, a couple different mills, finally those end up at some laminator, and you might have a few secondary manufacturers supplying a project. Okay, great, but how do we translate this to a project that wants to intentionally know where its wood is coming from and how to possibly influence that process? And so we can think about it through the lens of developing criteria based on objectives and values that meet owner, project team, and stakeholder values, and then engaging the supply chain and then doing the post-factum work of tracking and verifying where that fiber is coming from. And so in a similar framework as you might think of as FSC, there's this process of, again, sort of defining those values and those criteria and then doing the work along those lines here. And so project objectives could vary. I think, oh, we're missing one thing on this slide. Project objectives could vary, but at one end of the spectrum, we might say, hey, these are baseline values. If you're building with wood, we're gonna say, hey, that's already a good decision, and it comes with a lot of values out the gate. That might be kind of closer to the left side. But as you begin to engage with intentionality in your sourcing, you're able to amplify certain values or outcomes in your project that you might not be able to otherwise. So those might move into increased local economy as opposed to sort of regional economy, for instance, improved forest health outcomes, or social outcomes like supporting, for instance, tribal communities. And so to begin that work, we have to talk about transparency. What does that process actually look like? We have a couple sort of baseline tiers that we can begin talking about it. At the sort of baseline tier, we're just asking the question, what mills are supplying, say, a laminator? And if we can do that, we can get that data, then maybe we're able to basically create some kind of broad deduction of what the associative landowner makeup might look like for that project. And that's great, it's a good start. But if we continue to kind of dig back through the supply chain, we can ask more complex questions. For instance, which type and ratio of forest landowners provide to those said mills? And what this allows us to do is put together at least a sort of average landowner makeup type. We can say this project derived its wood from, X, Y, Z types of landowners, and maybe there are some sort of, again, deductive powers that we can apply to associated management types. You take it further, we can begin to ask questions like, which forests of origin specifically did the wood for this project come from? Which harvests? What were the harvest criteria? So as we get into that more granular level of transparency, we can speak a little bit more granularly to those management outcomes that we're seeking based on the criteria that you may have defined with a client. And then you can begin to speak a little bit to the impacts at a more specific level. Finally, at some point, transparency gives you the power of intentionality to say, hey, we very specifically want to know that the wood that ended up in our project is reflected in X, Y, or Z specific landowner or harvest. So we can actually ask those questions. Can we batch segregate at the mill? Can we source from specific locations that these mills don't typically procure from? And are there, for instance, temporal sourcing strategies like, hey, we know, X tribe is selling wood at a specific time of year. Is there a way to basically time our procurement to align our values with our purchase? And what that does allow you to do is then impact the sort of proportions of the landowner management impacts that you're attempting to achieve.
So then that leaves the question of how do we integrate into your team? In many instances, what we've found is that architects approach us and they say, well, we want to know where the wood is coming from for this project, and we will be a sub-consultant to the architect. Shout out to Brad, who's here, and we're working with Swinnerton on a project, and this is exactly the model we used to integrate with their team. We also can be a sub to the design assist on a where a contractor asks, hey, we need your help. We've already issued for construction, can you help us with this process at that point? And then we say, sure, we'll just sub under you or sub under one of your trades. And that seems to have been a sort of more popular for when issue for construction's already been out there and we're trying to retroactively do the process. And then I'm gonna shout out Carrie Waters, who is one of the projects where we've partnered with the city of Portland and we're doing a community center out here, and this is exactly the model that we used in that instance. The timeline, then reflecting back on what Evan just spoke about, it speaks to, well, how much flexibility do you want? What are your intentions? How much transparency do you want? So at level 1 and 2, the wood advisor, which is, we forgot to mention, is what our titles are, is what, you engage with us at really any point in your process. If issue for construction, everyone's going out to bid, hey, we want to figure this out, we'll be there. And it's a sort of a fluid process, and we're not bound by one, hey, you're done with schematic, this is the only time we can come in. We're very flexible in the process. But the more you want to know, the deeper you want to dive, then we can talk about, hey, well, you've got your schematic drawings done, great. I think we should talk now because we're going to be running out of time. And if you want to know where your harvest is coming from, then this is the time to engage us. But at level 3, which is sort of the specific landowners, that's when we engage the mills, we start talking to the laminators. Can you give us that information about your landowners? Are you willing to help us figure that out? And that's at the stage where we're still some flexibility, but it gets time consuming and there's harvests and only certain times a year where you can harvest. And if you're looking for something specific, that time starts to, not that we're gonna stop you, but if you want to get that information, engage us earlier on in the process, design development, preferably before your CDs are done. And then for level 4, which is the direct sourcing, which is where you want to influence where your wood is coming from, where you're harvesting from. If you want to know where your landowner is and what their management practices are, then highly suggest schematic design. Hey, call Sustainable Northwest. Say, hey, we want to speak to Evan or Ace, and we'll be there and we'll engage and we'll learn about the harvests that are happening. We'll learn about what your values are, and we can integrate into your team earlier on the process to get that information for you.
So I guess we got a couple kind of very big picture takeaways here. One is a lot of the work that we do very emphatically prioritizes meeting everyone where they're at. And so our take at the end of the day is that we want to support building with wood. And we do believe that all forests provide some spectrum of values. Right? And so, again, those can be ecological, social, economic. And as long as you're sourcing local, legally sourced wood, it's a net positive usage in construction. But we believe that intentional sourcing is a powerful market mechanism to drive incentives towards different management criteria that can achieve these outcomes that we're talking about today. In order to engage in that work, fundamentally, we have to build transparency within our supply chain. So transparency is really the basis for intentional sourcing. And what it does is it empowers us to quantify and influence those impacts and the impacts of our decisions, and as a whole, we believe it'll elevate the industry. All ships will rise with the tide. So I think that's it for us. So thank you.
My name is Bryan Montanio with A/A Architecture, and in conjunction with Opus Vitae Construction, we are working on a case study project called the Cow and Keats. So this project of ours has been a long time coming, and the goal of it has really been to showcase the types of constructions, the assemblies, and the methods of buildings that we're advocating for in the Pacific Northwest. And so this first concept project will be a pair of units. They're each about 600 square feet, and they will be using the materials that we're most promoting, as well as promoting the values of our firm, which is healthy, conscious, and durable buildings. And each of the units will be, as a showcase project, will be working through what we've done, where we've succeeded, where we think we can do better, and they'll be visitable. So short and long-term stays, as well as being able to take clients, which is something specifically that we're really excited about. All the time we're ending up in conversations with people when we get them excited about some concept or design or material that we're working on, and they're like, we want to see it, like where can we go? And this will actually be an opportunity for them not only to go and see it, to feel it, and to get the sense of quality that is hard to sometimes manifest through just images alone, but they'll be able to stay there and spend a couple nights. And if you believe, as I do, that architecture matters and that the quality of the space has intangibles that are sometimes really hard to convey to someone without actually experiencing it themselves, this is our attempt to try to relay that to people. The units themselves are, so each about 600 square feet. There is a central core that has the bath, utility, and kitchen area, and that separates a sleeping area as well as the main living space. And the overall design of it was geared towards capturing southern exposure. It also has a glimpse of the view of the St. John's Bridge, as well as maintaining the existing maple on site, which was not a super old tree, but it's really beautiful, and it was one of the founding principles for how we laid this out. In section, you can see the cathedral ceilings as well as the thick wall assembly, which we'll look at here in a moment. And the materials of this project have been at the core from the beginning of it, and we'll focus on the wood, like the wood products today, but in general, like everything that we're using in terms of finished materials, the tactile experiences as well as the performance were really important to this project. The first one I want to talk about is probably better described as once was wood. Wood insulated concrete forms, also known as insulated composite concrete forms. This is a product that's out of Philomath, Oregon, so it's local, and it's a mix of wood chips that have been mixed with cement and gone through a process where they're no longer susceptible to mold or to rot. So we can actually use them below grade, so they form our stem wall and then come up and create the exterior wall assembly. And as part of this non-toxic but also vapor open wall assembly, as long as we never separate the wood forms from the interior environment, we're actually able to use them to help moderate the interior temperature, or moisture, as well as the temperature. They don't support mold growth, they're non-combustible, they have a really great fire rating, and they're not susceptible to rodent or insect pressures. The sound qualities too is something that we're really excited to explore with this in combination with the triple pane windows that we're using, because in this climate, it's sometimes hard to justify the use of triple pane windows, the glass, but the sound quality that you get from them, we're hoping will actually have an effect that people will notice and really appreciate that, what that brings. There's actually going to be several of these materials that you'll hear how Sustainable Northwest Wood has been whispering in the ears of all of us doing these projects, but we're using Doug fir as an alternative for our siding. Cedar would be another great option as well, but another local species that has some natural rot resistance, and we're going to combine that with another local company for the finishing, so we'll get it pre-finished at Sustainable Northwest Wood. The western juniper, the native and invasive aspect of it is really kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but we've used juniper in other projects, and the feedback from our contractors has been that it can be hard to work with, and so we were excited to try to use this in an application that really lent itself to juniper. So we're going to be using this for our exterior planter beds, and that's going to be in place of concrete. So beautiful, but also a reduction in the concrete that gets used for retaining the property. And Here's an exterior of what that project will become. You can see the vertical Doug fir siding as well as the juniper planter out front. Here's another view of that, and that's the maple on the right there. On the interior, after the walls are constructed out of the wood insulated concrete forms, we'll be switching to framing lumber. One of the things that our firm has really been focusing on this past year is getting more involved with where our wood is coming from and learning about forestry practices in general. And the first thing I would say is just how not simple I've learned that it is, but also how important. With the framing lumber specifically, the white fir was an option for us to use as a structural material, which doesn't have as good of ratings as the Douglas fir does. But because we knew about this early on, we actually worked with our engineer so that he ran all the numbers as white fir so that we would be able to use either when it came time to ordering, so that we weren't limited by a particular species, but could use the wood that was the best source for when the project was needing that lumber. We're also going to use no added formaldehyde in the plywood, and I was excited that we're actually able to avoid any pressure treated lumber in the project altogether, and that has to do with how we're managing where wood is being used and making sure that we have capillary breaks and separation from any areas that have moisture. The wood fiber as an insulation, I think, is a really exciting and in the future is going to be even more viable. We're going to be using wood fiber as a blown-in product for all of the ceilings and the gable end walls. It has also helps manage moisture. It's part of a complete vapor open assembly and non-toxic. Most of the wood fiber in the U.S. has been sourced from Europe for a long while, and now it's being manufactured in New England. And eventually, I think it's going to be manufactured here, and it makes so much sense for it to be manufactured here. And once that happens, I think the price point will really make it, a lot easier for us to use it in projects just generally. But until that happens, it has been a difficult thing to manage just from the cost standpoint of it. But we're still looking at whether or not we can use it for part of our roof assembly for the rigid product, as well as the blown-in product that we already have sourced. Oh, I think I went back. Here we go. We're also using white fir for our ceiling. One of the things that we're going to be doing with this actually is leaving it unfinished, and part of that is to maintain its connection with the interior environment so that wood will naturally absorb and release moisture. And in something like a ceiling application where the need and ability to clean it easily is not as necessary as something that you're going to be touching all the time, we felt that was a trade-off that was worth doing. Here's a rendering of the interior. You can also see the window system that we're using, which we're sourcing from Germany. We'll have, it's a wood aluminum clad window. That's the white fir ceiling. That's the maple out through the window in the south unit. And here's just a quick update of where things currently stand. As of a couple weeks ago, that's the walls that about the height of where the headers will begin. Those are the wood insulated concrete form blocks, and they'll be finishing those up probably next week and starting the roof framing. There you go. Thank you very much.
I was going to spend this time talking about Sustainable Northwest Wood, but honestly, I feel like Sustainable Northwest Wood has been talked about a lot already. I'm thankful for that, all of you. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. First of all, some thank yous. First, I'd like to thank my team. I know that Jake and Malia are here. They're here every day for us. They're here tonight working. We've got Garrett behind the bar, who not only does that, but he is really the engine that makes this whole warehouse hum. And of course, I would like to acknowledge Lynn, She is here, mind, body, and spirit, sometimes even when she probably shouldn't be. And she has pulled all of this together for us. And so a big round of thanks to this crew and everything they do. Secondly, a round of thanks to all of you. In the spirit of the Build Local Alliance, really it's not about individuals, it's about the collective and what we can all do together. With that in mind, I think it's really fun when I look around the room and I see this vertical vision of the Build Local Alliance embodied here. And so just quickly stand, or if you're already standing, raise your hands as I call out the place in that chain that you might be involved in. If you're involved in forest management, land ownership, forestry in some way, raise your hand, stand, make yourself known. If you're involved in logging, milling, production, fabrication, keep your hands up. Once they're up, they don't come down. If you're in one of those things, let it be known. If you're involved in the architecture side of things, design, development, any of that. If you're involved in building and construction, let it be known. Is everybody keeping their hands up? Anybody facilitates these trades in any way, put your hands up. So this is what it's all about, right? I mean, each of us plays an incredibly important role and does our part, but collectively in what we can do as a team, as a unit, this is what starts to make a difference, and this is where real change starts to happen. So a big round of applause now for everybody in this room. For everything that all of you guys do. So again, I'm going to stay true to my word. I'm not going to talk much about sustainable Northwest wood, but I will say we love forests. We love the communities and the people who depend on these forests, who work in these woods and make things with these trees. And because of those two loves, that's why we created this business, to make those products available to you and through your business with us, able to support these forests and those communities and all that they bring to the Pacific Northwest. In a nutshell, that is what we're all about. That's what we believe in, and that's why we show up here every day. So, I get to skip over all of these slides a little bit. This is where it all grows. We've got an amazing wood basket in the Pacific Northwest. Most productive forest ecosystem on the planet. We've got a great cadre of workers here. The people are the ones who make it happen. It is about supporting the forest. It's also about supporting the people. It's about putting a human face on this. No, this is not Jim Zacharias, who we saw earlier. This is this doppelganger, Kendall Derby, there in Fossil, Oregon, who does a lot of our juniper work for us. And we believe in responsibly managed forest in all the forms that comes. There's many paths towards the end, right? And we try and honor and respect them all. We're looking for those that are verifiable, those that have integrity behind them, and those that are making a real difference and going above and beyond what's just required by law. The forest practices and our silvicultural knowledge is an evolving world. We evolve with that. We learn more, we do more, we change, and we do better all the time. And I want to honor and respect each and every one of you that does that. So the project then that I was asked to talk about is the Portland Airport. Who's had the opportunity to visit it? It is truly an amazing accomplishment. The port set the bar pretty high early on. They came to us and said, we want to use all local wood in this. We said, we can do that. This is the Pacific Northwest. We can get you wood locally. We also want to know that it's coming from well-managed forest. That began a question of, well, what does that mean, a well-managed forest? And the port, to their credit, said, well, let's talk about that. Let's bring in forestry experts and start understanding what makes a forest well-managed. Let's not have it be about a certain standard, but let's have it be about an outcome, about performance in those woods. And let's find a pathway for people to participate who really are making a difference. They worked with advisors, initially Sustainable Northwest Wood. We passed that off to the nonprofit Sustainable Northwest. And then they reached a little bit higher. They said, yes, local, yes, well-managed, and we want to tell the stories. We want to celebrate the people. Can that be done? And the answer was no. Except for a few people who said, maybe that can happen. that could be possible. Let's think about that. Let's talk more. They had the advantage of lead time on this and were able to piece together back to the forest exactly where much of the wood came from. Not just in sort of the generic sense if it came from this area, this national forest, this landowner, but which harvest, which people, which families, which communities, which tribes, really tracing it back. So with the rest of the time, I just want to highlight a couple of those examples. Some of the people in the room here were involved in this. This is their map. I don't know how well you can see it, but just take a couple moments to digest what they meant by local. We did make sure that they reached to all parts of the state, not just up and down the I-5 corridor. And for them, diversity was not just about, types of forest, but people that are involved. Scale of forest, national forest, community forest, tribal forest, Camp Namanu, Willamette University, Richard and Anna Honshu, all kinds of different people involved in it. And because they did that, they're able to tell the story about that. Rather than have the wood be known for its not known for, its anonymity, it's about celebrating the people and places that it came from. So now a few of the specific uses of the wood in the airport. One of the things that we provided was the Douglas fir lattice, all of the 3x6, which hangs from that roof. 660,000 board feet put end to end. Those 3x6s would reach 83 miles. All of it, number one, appearance grade fir, but most notably it was traceable back to 10 local forests. The Mankey Mill, Castor's Custom Cutting, Elk Creek Forest Products, all of these were involved in the production of it. And what was unique is each of those entities said, we'll be willing to segregate the logs as they come in, run them in batches, so when it comes out our doors, when the truck's loaded up at the end of the day, we can tell you which forest that came from. Also in the airport, Oregon white oak panels, a fantastic story here. There was a lot of mass plywood provided for the airport by Freres Brothers. I think they're here tonight. There they are. There was also a lot of mass plywood cutoffs that happened as a result of that. What was done by Sankofa Lumber and Trillium Pacific Millwork is taking those cutoffs, re-gluing them together into core material, so that wouldn't be a waste product, it was something that was reused. On top of that core, Oregon white oak was put. That Oregon white oak came from a variety of sources here. Epilogue provided some of that. Gobi Walnut provided some of that. J&B Wood Products, Oregon Hardwood Companies have provided some of that. Probably more than any of them could have done as an individual. I know, David, you probably would say you could have done it all. But again, the collective was evolved to put the face on that. So recycled mass plywood with local Oregon white oak put on top of that to provide several hundred of these large plywood sheets that are in the airport terminal base. Douglas fir accents. It really began with the roof for the airport, whether it be the mass plywood, the glue lambs, the lattice. That was kind of the focus. But then they started thinking about the other wood products. They were getting excited. So what about this? What else can we do? And so we were able to connect them with the Cow Creek tribe. We heard about them earlier with their incense cedar. They also had Doug fir that burned in that same fire. That Doug fir is being used for the 3x3, what they call the seam wall in the airport. JZ Lumber, who we also heard about earlier, who's providing the white fir for the Green Hammer Project, provided Western Larch or Tamarack. I take that back. It is Douglas fir on there. Douglas fir, that's this 1x6 lattice. Initially, the airport was going to stop with just the roof, but when they started to understand the opportunities and what could be done, it just kept pushing it a little bit further and a little bit further to tell the stories the more they could. And I think one of the keys for them was with the airport and what made it work is they didn't ask the question of, this is what we want, can the forest get it for us? They then started asking the question, well, what does the forest offer that we can use? And finally, I think what that ultimately evolved to that occurred to me is, what are we trying to achieve here? How do we want this wood to perform? What is the objective? given that, what are the opportunities and what are the possibilities around wood use? And I think it's that sort of early project visionary thinking at a performance level that really makes it possible and really opens up the doors to a whole wide range of options of wood products will have these values associated with them. Oregon white oak floors. I know we have somebody from Xena here tonight who did those beautiful floors in the airport. Thank you, Xena. Yeah, big round of applause for Xena. That wasn't enough. She was an amazing company. They're doing this and been doing it for so many years. And then we also had the opportunity to do some Oregon white oak lattice, like a herringbone pattern in it, which they, like it or not, chose to do this ebony stain on the wood. I think just to give a little contrast, something a little bit different. So great wood products, hardwoods and the airport floors in there. Whoops, back one. Back on track. Or other Oregon white oak uses. Here they did in the seating area, a large, I think like almost 24 by 24 solid Oregon white oak log pieces that were provided. Lots of 6-quarter and 8-quarter Oregon white oak going into the benches, seats, and stairs going through there. At that point, and one of the entities that maybe I don't see recognized in the room tonight, who's incredibly important, are the millwork shops and the fabricators, the cabinet shops, folks here like Isaac, Creo Woodworks, Trillium Pacific Millworks has been part of the Build Local Alliance for a long time. Having these entities who can take that raw wood and then process it into something beautiful, finished product, are incredibly important pieces of the chain, and it would not happen without them. And so, I think wrapping it up, at first, I was thinking these are sort of like questions, that Sustainable Northwest Wood has. But then as I was listening to everybody's presentations and recognizing the commonality of not just our values, but also our hopes, our dreams, and our challenges as you try and make these things real, it kind of occurred to me, I think, that the where do we go from here probably applies to not just the panel, but maybe everybody in the room to a certain extent. And how do we do more of this? What are the secrets to replication? What are the lessons we've learned? As I contemplate on it, and again reinforced when I was listening to people, relationships are such a big part of it. And then I think one of the reasons that it did work well for the airport is they didn't necessarily try and go out and reinvent the infrastructure. They didn't start new businesses. They figured out, how do we build upon existing relationships? How do we support the businesses that have been doing this for so many years already? And it's that support of the existing infrastructure, and it's the bridge building between those companies that I think makes it work from that traceability point of view. What's great about the relationships, the way that the Port of Portland had done it, is that they're enduring. They made it real. We made visits to the forest. They made visits to the mills. They've documented it. And I think more than anything else, and probably where I want to end, is that they've celebrated it, right? The wood products industry, the forestry work that we do, so often it happens in the shadows. And there's so much good work that's going on out there. And their intentionality of going out, identifying it, putting the spotlight on it, celebrating it, I think is what's made all the difference. And it's kind of what I hope becomes the vision for the future. I just hope there's going to be a lot more of these projects to come. So, I guess I'm tasked with wrapping it up, but I know that there's time for questions, and so, yeah, I welcome everybody to we can just pass the mic and gather around if anybody has questions for any of the panelists. Or Lynn, if you want to MC that, that's great too.
Got it, great.
Thank you.